let's review the story of Gideon, and we'll use these pictures. Do you remember in the story, the Israelites and Gideon used clay pitchers or jars to cover up their torches so they could sneak up on the Midianite camp at night? Well, that's what these little pictures of pitchers are to represent, to help us to remember that. And all the facts of the story are on, each written on a little picture, and they're all scrambled up, and I got to put them in order. You can do this too at home. I'm going to post a copy of a sheet of these little pictures, and you can ask your parents to print them out for you, and then you can cut them out and put them in order, and maybe tell the story to someone in your family, your brother or your sister or your parents, and get this story in your head and in your hearts. It's really important that we know God's stories and know the story of the Bible leading up to the wonderful story of Jesus and how we're saved through Jesus' love. It's good for us to know all of those stories and to keep them in our hearts so that we don't become like the Israelites and forget about God. First of all, the angel talks to Gideon. So Gideon was just a boy or a young man, and he was working to provide food for his family. He had held back a little bit of the grain, some grain that the Midianites had somehow not stolen. He had it and was grinding it, turning it into flour to make bread for his family. He had to hide and do that down in a hole so the Midianites wouldn't see him and steal that last little bit of food. He was resting under an oak tree, and the Lord sent an angel to come and talk to him. And the angel said, "Gideon, the Lord has chosen you to save your people, to help rescue your people from the Midianites." Well, you can imagine how shocking that was. This miraculous meeting is in verses 11 through 24 of chapter 6. You can read about that wonderful meeting and think about what it would be like to have an angel of the Lord come and talk to you. That same night, Gideon destroyed Baal's altar. So during the night, the Lord appeared to Gideon again and said, God wants you to destroy the altars for the idol Baal. The people of Israel had started worshiping idols, false idols, and had built altars to them. Gideon's own father had built an altar to Baal at their home. And so during the night, Gideon went out and he tore down that altar, and he built a new altar to the one true God, and he offered a sacrifice on that. He worshiped God. And this public act of worship was noticed when the people got up the next morning. They saw what Gideon had done and what he was doing, and they were reminded that they were supposed to worship God, the one true God, and not to worship idols. So Gideon's influence was a good influence on his family and his community. You know, people are watching us, and they watch what we do. And when we worship God with a great attitude, sometimes other people will want to join in. Always know that people are watching you, and that you can influence people for good. So God made the fleece wet and the ground dry. So imagine that an angel has come and talked to you, and then during the night an angel comes and talks to you again, and it would be kind of confusing to know, is that really an angel, or did I have a dream? Am I confused about this? This was serious stuff. And so Gideon wanted a sign from God. He asked God, will you please give me a sign so that I know for sure that this is your plan and this is your will? And he said, I'm going to put this fleece, which is wool from a sheep or something. He said, I'm going to put this fleece out tonight. And if it's really your will, if this is really you talking to me, I want you to make the fleece wet, soaking wet, and the ground all around it dry. And so God did. When Gideon woke up the next morning, the fleece was very, very wet. It was heavy with water, and he had to wring it out, and it just filled up a bowl with water. It wasn't just a little bit damp. It was really wet. It was a clear message from God, and the ground all around it was perfectly dry. Gideon felt like, this is God. God is talking to me. Well, he was about almost 100% sure, but not 100% sure. And so the next night, he asked God to give him one more sign. In verse 39, sorry about that. In verse 39, he says, God, please don't be angry with me, but just give me one more sign. Let me do one more test with the fleece. This time I'm going to put the fleece out, and if it's dry and the ground around it is wet in the morning, then I will know for sure that this is your will. And so that's what God did. Gideon laid out the fleece at night. He went to bed. He got up in the morning, and the fleece was perfectly dry, and the ground around it was all very, very wet. So Gideon knew that truly this was God's will for his life, and it was God telling him to lead the Israelites against the Midianite soldiers. You know, God is very patient with us, and sometimes when we're seeking God's will for our lives, it's okay to pray and to ask God to give us signs, and God will be patient and kind with us and generous with his love and with his signs and with his assurances, so that we will feel more comfortable to be able to do what God's will is. So because of Gideon's influence and reminding the people how much they loved God and that God was with them, 32,000 Israelites volunteered to be soldiers, and they came to Gideon and said, we're going to be with you, and we're going to fight the Midianites. God said, nope, that is too many. Chapter 7, verse 2 tells us that God said if the Israelite army was that big and strong, the people would think their own strength had defeated the Midianites and saved them. God told Gideon to send home anyone who was afraid. Well, soldiers getting ready to go into battle, of course, are going to be afraid. 22,000 of the men were afraid, and they were sent home by Gideon. So now there were only 10,000 soldiers left. 10,000 is not very many for an army. If you'll remember, in chapter 6, we were told that it was impossible to even count the Midianites and the camels that they had. There were so many, it was impossible to count them. So 10,000 is really not that big of an army, but God said it was still too many. He wanted the Israelites to realize he was saving them from the Midianites, not the soldiers. So he told Gideon to choose another way to choose soldiers. He said, take them all down by the river and watch how they drink. The ones who kneel down all the way on their knees and put their face to the water to sip up the water, those are the ones I want you to send home. And those who go to the water and cup up the water in their hands and lap it up like a dog, those are the ones I want you to keep. Well, only 300 people drank that way. So out of the 32,000 original soldiers that had come, God told Gideon to only keep 300 soldiers to go to battle against these numerous Midianites. Gideon sent 300 men to fight the Midianites. I don't really like the way that says that, because Gideon didn't really send the 300 men. Gideon went with them. He led them. He was one of the soldiers too that went into battle with the Lord against the Midianites. Gideon and his soldiers took pitchers, torches, and trumpets. What? They were going to war and they didn't take any weapons? No swords, no knives, no bows and arrows? How could that be? Well, that's because this was a battle that only the Lord was going to win. It wasn't going to be won with guns and tanks and airplanes. It was going to be won by the power of God. So each man was told to take a trumpet, a ram's horn that would go doo 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 doo, and a torch, which was a light, a stick with fire on the end of it, and a clay jar or a pitcher to cover up that torch so that the torch would not be shining brightly, so that they could be sneaky. They were to go at night, and they were to surround the Midianite camp. So the 300 men spread out quietly, sneakily, following God's directions around the camp of the Midianites. And then, on a command from Gideon, they blew their trumpets and broke their jars or pitchers. So suddenly, all of a sudden, at one time, they all went with their horns, and then they crashed their pitchers so that their torches were shining brightly. Imagine that you're in the Midianite camp and you're asleep, and suddenly there's a loud noise, there's horns blowing, and there's crashing sounds, and you look up and there's lights all around you where it had been dark. Now there are fires all around you. You might think that there were thousands of soldiers surrounding you. Loud noises and bright lights coming on in the middle of the night are scary. They're frightening. It's much worse at night than it is during the day. So they were terrified. The army of the Midianites kill each other. When we read in chapter 7, verse 22, that this didn't just happen by coincidence, and it didn't just happen because they were scared. The Midianites God caused the Midianites, the Lord caused the Midianites to draw their swords upon each other, and they killed each other. Basically, they all killed the other soldiers, so the Midianites destroyed themselves. Some of them got away, they ran away, and the Israelite soldiers chased them far across the Jordan River so that they were gone and they never came back. God's small army won because God was with them. There is no way that this happened just because of 300 men with some pitchers and some torches and some horns. This was God's doing. God defeated the Midianites and drove them out of the land so that the Israelites could live in peace and abundance once again. The Israelites were weak, and they needed someone to save them. They needed someone strong to save them. Even Gideon was not strong enough to save them. God himself saved the Israelites. We all need someone mighty to save us. Now, we needed someone to save us from our sin, and God sent Jesus to save us from our sin. Only Jesus was strong enough to save us from our sins. We can't save ourselves. We all need someone mighty to save, and God sends his son Jesus to be our Savior. We must always remember that and be thankful. Thank you for your time today, and I hope that we get to see each other real soon.